Hello everybody, this is a Paper 2 Geographical Skills online lesson. There is an accompanying worksheet for you to work through. There aren't too many questions on the worksheet itself. The worksheet is really designed for you to add some detail and add some notes to this presentation. So Paper 2, you will have heard me talk about quite a bit throughout the lessons that we do. And indeed, by the time you get to April of year 11, you'll have covered all that you need to do and learn for Paper 2. So rather than teaching it as separate, what I tend to do is work through all the skills within the Paper 1 with all the lessons. That's why our lessons are sometimes very intense. So there is going to be some new stuff here, but for the most part, it's going to be information and things that you do know already. So obviously testing geographical, cartographic, statistical skills, describing photographs and patterns and trends, and inferring from photographs. So a few points, so nothing for you to write down there because that information is on the top of your worksheet. You need to be as accurate as you possibly can with measuring and plotting. So there is some allowance. There are 2-mark questions, 3-mark questions. You can maximize the 2 and 3 by getting exactly right, but you still can get one question out of 2 or 3 marks for getting measuring, plotting quite near to the actual answer. That's not a reason to not be accurate, thinking well, you'll get 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 2. I really want you guys to maximize the 2 or 3 as much as you possibly can. Second point, use a ruler to complete graphs and measure straight line distances. I know I'm on your case all the time about using rulers in class. You should have rulers, of course, as geographers. In an exam room, rulers will be provided, but it's very frequently where students decide at that very moment in the exam, an intense situation, not to use a ruler, and you can make some big errors and drop some marks really easily. Third point, use the evidence. I've got this in small quotation marks. Ensure that you use the evidence. What I mean by this is make sure that you are talking and referring to the evidence that you're using. So as can be seen in figure 1, as in the insert, as in the image or table. Difference between describe and explain. We do describe questions early on in year 10 and more into the describe, explain and analyze into back in the year 10 and year 11. So where there are describe features, and this is very much the case in Paper 2, these are easy marks to get. You're just describing the picture. You do not need to explain. So please make sure that you're decoding the question and you can identify very easily how many marks you're going to get for that answer. We are using evidence from a map. Please make sure you're using the map extract key. You're not expected to remember lots of map symbols or OS map symbols. Many of the symbols may well be new to you, even though we use maps quite a lot in the lessons. So do use the map extract key symbols. 6-figure references are something that students often fall down on. So if we've done 6-figure references already, that's great. If not, we will do in the future. Okay, there's a section on your worksheet and with a little box and it says Paper 2 will be testing me on. So this is what we'll be testing you on. I've highlighted the keywords really in red that you might want to write down in that box there. So symbols on maps. Okay, so you need to identify if it is a symbol, and then give the reference for the position of the symbol rather than the name of the place. Measuring distance, and again, this is about using the scale and the skills to measure distance. And there are a couple of ways to do that for Paper 2, which I'll go through a bit later. Write down the units that are being asked. Don't assume that the units are something else. Make sure you're looking at the question and provide the units. These are just points to remember and where students have fallen down in the past. So make sure you always give the units in your answer rather than just writing down the number. Know your compass bearings. There's no shortcut for that. You're all experienced geographers now, and I'm sure you know your north, east, south, and west. Completing graphs. Sometimes this is just a very, very small addition to a graph or a picture. Use your ruler in all cases. When you're drawing a graph, take your time to ensure you're drawing the right type of graph. Here's a good example of one down here, a divided bar graph. So those are, in essence, what you'll be tested on. So this lesson is split into 3 parts. First part is map skills. Second is describing photographs and images, like describing me there, canyoning down somewhere in Serbia. And part 3 is interpreting. Okay, map skills. As you might imagine, this is about using and interpreting OS maps and different scales. These are the 2 scales that you're going to be used to seeing. You'll need to know how to use and understand 4 grid references and also 6 grid references. 4 grid references in a first instance, you're almost always asked to use 6 grid references anyway. You need to be able to identify direction, distances, measuring straight and curved line distances. There's a little table, a rag table in your worksheet now, and it's giving you an option to write down red, amber, green, and how comfortable you feel on those things. If you could spend a moment now to do that. So let's look at map scales. Further down on your worksheet, you've got it written there. So 1 in 50,000 is 1 centimetre is 50,000 centimetres. 1 centimetre on a map is equal to half a kilometre. So this is an actual map extract from 2020. So 25,000 centimetres is 1/4 of 1 kilometre. So let's go on to a map reference. This is a question, all of these questions are from exam papers. So here's one. Identify a type of road in grid reference 704355. So this is obviously a 6 grid reference. We want 70 along the eastings, and that's along the bottom, and then we want 35 along the northings. So 70 and 35. Then we also want the 6 grid reference. So in this case, on the eastings, we have 74, so that's almost halfway, hence the arrow halfway through. And 35.5, so if you look along the side of the northings, you'll see 35, and again, almost halfway. So those 2 arrows combining points to that road there. Now, that's not the end of it, of course. We might assume that's a minor road or a small road. It's really important, again, we go back to the key and identify exactly what it says. So here we have a road, generally less than 4 meters wide, and that's exactly what you would need to write. So this is a sketch map of a map extract, and in paper 2 you'll almost always have to use 2 documents in sync with each other. So a map extract, which is an A3 colour piece of paper which you'll be given, along with an image like this which will be inside your exam paper. So this question asks you to study the map, gives you the scale. Figure 1.1, again, where is figure 1.1? It's the one we're looking at right now. This shows some of the features in the east of the map extract. Study figure 1.1 and the map extract. So those 2 below. So I know that might be very difficult to see. The OS maps that you're actually given are real OS maps. They're printed in colour. They can be very complicated. You don't need to understand every aspect of it in many ways to interpret it. You just need to understand some of the basics, really. So for us, looking at this map here, which I've struggled to try and fit onto the screen, we've got the sketch map. And if you look at the eastings and the northings, we can identify exactly which squares we're talking about. So in this case, we're talking about these squares here. And there's one column missing, but you get the idea. Starting from 33, and the northings is missing off there, but it's 34 to 37. Now we still can't see it, can we? So just to make it easier, I've just made it a bit bigger. So this is the actual square that we're looking at, or the squares that we're looking at. So matching up the sketch map to the map extract, and suddenly makes it a little bit more easy to see. So we can see now along here, that's the county boundary. You need to know that when you look at your key. You can see the main road here, which is this one here, A. So it's asking you to identify A, B, D, which is the spot height, and C down here, this area here, C. Okay, so let's do that. So the type of road A is a regional road. Feature B is a county boundary. The land area in use in area C is a coniferous plantation. Now, if you had forgotten or didn't know the OS map symbol for a coniferous plantation, that's actually in the map key extract symbol list. So that's all you need to do, really. You identify what's in the map and identify how to read the key. The last one is the height above sea level at the spot height of D. So in this case, it's 63. I know you can't make it out here, but it's there. Here's another question. Find where the church is on the east side of the river on figure 1.1. What is the six-figure grid reference of the church? So rather than go through another example there, this is just to point out to you that this is a 2-mark question. You can get 1 point for getting it close, but to get 2 points, you'd actually have to get it really, really close. So where there's a 2-mark question, there's an option, there is an opportunity for you to get an additional mark if you get it really, really close. So do double check, because often you'll find that your first reference seems right. And then once you've had a look and you see it's a 2-mark question, you realise actually there might be something a little closer. Here's an area northeast of the map. And the question, describe the relief in the area shown in figure 2. So when we're describing relief, what we're talking about is landforms, heights, and please use full sentences, don't use lists. So I'll allow you to do that right now on your worksheet. So a 4-mark question, that's the things we could have talked about. We could have said the coniferous plantation, of course. The highest point at 80 metres. That's just there. See, we can see a contour line, you can see 80 metres. We have relatively flat land. Now remember, this is looking for 4 marks. This is relatively flat land, especially if we look from here, the coniferous plantation, 74, 75. This is all around the same height. So the height is not the point here. It's relatively flat in this whole area. We might also want to talk about the relief itself, which is flat between 72 and 74 metres. So that's enough to get you those 4 points, really. Here's another complicated map extract. This is looking at spot heights and triangulation or trig pillars. So if we have a look, we can see these heights here, and we can see a trig point here. So a trig point is the blue triangle. This is a, I'll show you a picture actually. This is what a trig point looks like. So trig points are not in use anymore, apart for tourist reasons. People like to visit them. There's thousands of them in the UK. They were used 100 years ago to measure the baseline for heights in the UK. like that you'll see trig points on maps, and you'll probably have to mention those. Okay, so just have a look at the features on the map I might need to identify. You've probably got quite a few now you can start adding. So we're looking at relief, boundaries, trig points, contours, land use. So here's another question on relief and drainage. This one looks a bit more complicated. I'm just going to point out a few things for you here, and we will look at more of these maps over the coming months. Okay, so we've got mountains, we've got steep slopes or scarps. We've got the highest points of 400 meters. I'll show that here, that's there. So if you look at where my pointer is, we can see that we've got a gradient, a pretty even gradient, and then a very steep gradient here. So it's getting really, really steep. So we can see the mountain starts at 100 meters there, or below, see, and then goes up to 400. I've got a higher point. Okay. There are concave slopes, V-shaped valleys. Here are the V-shaped valleys. And we've got spurs again here, just in here. So we'll do, if we haven't done landforms already, we will go over landforms with rivers, when we do rivers. So we can see the relief of the land is lower in the northwest area of the map. This is all in this area here, relatively flat. We can't see tight contours together. So this is flat area, it's a flat area. It's a relatively flat area. Drainage is an interesting one. So we can see drainage, we can see small tributaries here. We can see a dendritic river system here, which just means, well, I'll show you an image in a minute. That's a dendritic drainage system. It's like a tree, really. So if you see an area, something like this, inland, they're dendritic river systems. You might recognise these as almost the shape of a delta. That's a dendritic drainage system. So worth writing that down as well, please. In terms of features on a map, I might need to identify dendritic drainage. Various other patterns you might observe, and these are the patterns in the way that rivers drain, and this is to do with rock formation. So where we've got jointed bedrock here, it's a much harder jointed bedrock, water flows in this kind of motion. Where more sedimentary rock, it flows in this kind of direction. So dendritic, jointed, and radial. Another question on sand dunes. So using the OS map and your own understanding, explain how the sand dunes between Santa Rosa and Lepocano del Rio were formed. As I said before, a lot of these questions in paper 2 a non-geographer could answer. So you would get, a non-geographer would get 20 to 30%. Not a pass, but it's 20 to 30% without any geography knowledge. This obviously requires some geography knowledge. If we haven't done dunes, we will do, so don't worry about it too much for now. But a long explanation would be that. So that would be a FOCA 4-mark question. We would have to talk about prevailing winds, the erosion, the transportation, and the deposition of sand, and then the growing of marine grass and dune succession. Okay, measuring distances. Seems quite an easy thing. Measuring the shortest route as the crow flies. Point A to B, use a ruler, of course. There are other ways you might need to measure distance. On the scales. So let's have a look at measuring distance between this road here, Boyton Hoyle, right up to Hill Farm. So this is obviously a winding road. We want to get it as exact as we possibly can. So imagine trying to straighten that road out. If we could straighten that road out, we would get a straight measurement. And we can straighten that road out by using this technique with a bit of paper, which I'll show you in a second. But essentially what we're doing is marking on the straightest points. So from here to here is straight, here to here straight, straight, straight. Sometimes the straights are very, very small, but we mustn't miss any of them. So these are straight points as much as we can get them straight. Here's a great example. So we're measuring a point from point A to B. We get the edge of a piece of paper and we keep that as straight as we possibly can, and then we mark off a point. Move that paper round, find the straightest point before it curves, and mark another point. It may seem tedious, you may feel like you want to miss one, but there are no measurements that you do in an exam paper where you have to do more than maybe 8 or 9. So just take your time, get it right, take the measurement. Then apply the scale. That is your straight line measurement of that bendy road. Okay, let's look at contour lines now. Are you sure the speakers are on?
When you're out and about, it's really useful to get a sense of the shape and height of the surrounding landscape. And on an OS map, you do that using contour lines. These are the faint reddish-brown lines you can see running across here. And eventually, you come to a number. That'll give you the height above sea level of that particular line. And that line is running between interconnected points of the same height. The difference in between contour lines is going to be 5 meters or 10 meters, and you can tell that by looking at the legend on your map. Here, on a shallow slope, the contour lines will be far apart. When you visit somewhere like this, the contour lines are much closer together to show a much steeper slope. With a bit of practice, you can look at a 2-dimensional map like this and start to get in your head a complete 3-dimensional picture of what the landscape looks like. And that's a really important tool in navigation.
So when you're working with contour lines, the best thing to do is imagine, you first see it flat. So this is the image on the bottom. You've got this on page 2 of your worksheet. Imagine picking up the highest point and just pulling it up, and that'll give you a good indication of what it might look like. So the bottom is a flat version of the contour map, and that's the ideal version on the top. So where you've got the image on page 2 of your worksheet, it's probably useful to write down the gaps in the gaps between the contour lines, either 5 meters or 10 meters. So write that down. The other key points to remember, and it's written just below, where they are close together, the slope is steep, and when they're far apart, there is a gentle slope. So we use these use descriptive words quite a lot when we've done this in the past. There are some contour lines that have the height above or below sea level written on them, but you'll generally will be looking at those above sea level. And as we just learned, they are usually orange or brown in colour. So let's spin those contours round, just gives a better idea, better look at what they look like. So let's look at the contour lines on a map itself. And I've already added the arrows of what we might be seeing here. So I'd like you to take that image on page 2 in the middle and annotate it around as we do this. So we'll do this together. So we've got contours that are close together, which have got a steep slope. There's a hill peak at the top, a very small hill peak, you can see that. These upside down V's, these are valleys, V-shaped valleys. We've also got a flat area there, which indicates a ridge or a spur. Just identifying some of those on a contour map. Moving on to part 2. So we've already done quite a lot of this already. This is about describing photographs and images, not explaining them, just describing them. We didn't about to describe landforms, natural vegetation, land use and settlement. So your paper 2 geographical skills is both human geography and physical geography based. You'll need to describe patterns or trends from figures. When I say figures, I mean images, tables, pictures, graphs. And you will need to be able to explain what you can see in the images. So there's a few boxes there on the base of page 2. Just have a look through those 4 points you will need to do. So an image in the background, so I've already put the model answer up, and this is a question asking how sand dunes are formed. So it's a nice, beautiful colour picture that was given to you in an insert, and you had to provide an example of that. So that's information obviously you need to know. Here's a short model answer, and this is a 4-mark answer. As long as it's very clear and succinct, it doesn't need to be longer. It could be written longer, and I would not discourage anybody who can write quickly and think quickly, wants to be more descriptive. But in terms of ticking off all the boxes of 4 marks, that's really all you need. So I'm just going to pause for a minute just so you can read that. Another really tough question I thought a couple of years ago, and this one is describing the vegetation seen in the photograph, because it wasn't clear. You can see it's quite blurry. That's how it was provided in the exam paper. But if it's just about describing, we can see a lot. We already know where in the world this is, so we can talk about tall trees, long trunks, thin trunks, emergence. So we can see at the top. Straight trunks, palms. We can see right at the foreground. In fact, there's a banana plantain right in the foreground there. There are shorter trees, so we can already see the canopy layers, can't we? We can see trees, shrubs, bushes, trees at different heights. We've got broad, large leaves. We could also say it's lush. We've got different colours of leaves as well. The vegetation is dense, close together. And right in the foreground, you can see on the left-hand side, you can see some lianas. Another one. This is from 2008. Describe the relief, the settlement, and land use shown in the photograph. Quite a tough one. In fact, let me just go back, because if you look on page 3 of your worksheet, I provided that image for you. So perhaps just write down a handful for now. So again, just being careful in terms of making sure you use the identify and use the command word. So the command word here is describe, not explain. So that was on the vegetation. That's obviously a physical geography question. Here's a human geography question, but looking at both human features and physical geography features. Again, really quite tough, really, in terms of what they provided you in 2008, because the question was describe the relief, settlement, and land use shown in the photograph. And they've made it easy in some way, because they've mentioned relief and they've mentioned settlement, they've mentioned land use, but you're not always going to get that. So what I'd like you to do in that picture is to write down those 3 points. If you're asked to describe geographical features, you can see human features. We want to make sure we're writing about relief, so the natural landscape, the settlement itself. So we might see low-level housing, for example. It might be an urban geography picture, so you might talk about different types of buildings. Then land use itself, how the land is being used. So we're going to have a look at this picture. So our relief, what we can see is in a valley, or the bottom of a valley. There is flat floor, there are steep sides. Our settlement, where these houses have been built or settled, we can see they're at the foot of a slope. It's a village, and there are gentle sloping roofs. Some of these things can be inferred, because again, this picture was from 2008, and I thought this was a bit too blurry to get that level of detail without knowing something about it. But if you can infer something about that area, it would make it easy. So you're not going to lose marks for saying something that's not there. So if you see in a photograph like this, if you break it down in these 3 sections, relief, settlement, and land use, you're more likely to maximise your marks. So in land use, we can see there's fields, there's cultivation, there's agriculture, there's forest. There's obviously, not obviously, but it's clear in the bottom right, there's an irrigation channel. And we can see a road. Now, can't quite see a road, but I've added road in there because there's going to be a road. So those are 2 describe questions. Complete your box on that worksheet, please. So here's an explained question using the same picture. Explain how each feature is adapted to the tropical rainforest. So this is where your information, your knowledge about adaptation within tropical rainforest is really, really important. There's various things, because you can't see all the detail there when we talk about adaptations in tropical rainforest. The image is just to get you thinking about that and help you thinking about adaptations. So there's lots of things you could say in terms of broad leaves and lianas and tall trunks and wide leaves. Okay, back to human geography. So there's a question here, describe the pattern of energy consumption. It's a 4-mark question. I've given you the answer there. So it's just for you to have a read through. So I'd like you to just spend a moment reading through it now. As you do so, if you could see if you can find 4 marks. Have I provided a 4-mark answer to this question? Okay, moving on. Describing the location of the Great Green Wall. Pretty easy question, which you're unlikely to get this type of question in paper 2, but it's a location question which you might get elsewhere. And it's an opportunity for me to help you remember how you describe location. So if you can remember the acronym we use to describe location, if you can put it in a little box on your worksheet. If you can't remember, you will in a moment. It's a clock with 3 C's. Let's look now at settlement patterns on a map. So this is taking you back to middle of year 10. And for some of you, we might have done this in year 9. So I've highlighted in red what you need to complete. So if you to complete these as we go through them. So these are the different ways you might describe the way the patterns have been located and how they're settled and what they look like. So we have a concentrated or nucleated pattern. So gathered together, that's the first one. We can also have a clustered nucleated pattern. This is again like nucleated patterns, but next to other nucleated patterns. Third one is peripheral pattern, obviously around the edge. So I've used an example there, the distribution of volcanoes. We can talk about the distribution of volcanoes in that sense, along the ring of fire. A linear pattern. So we might get linear patterns in terms of housing. We might get linear patterns along a river. And we have a dispersed or a scattered settlement. So looking at land use, we might see farms in that way. If you look on page 3 of our worksheet, got a little image there to help you. Here's another paper 2 question that requires you to explain the distribution. Sorry, describe the distribution, but explain the distribution at the same time. So very helpfully ask you to refer to plate tectonics in your answer. Now, I know some of you may be able to do this, but let's just take this step by step. So using figure 3, describe and give reasons for the distribution of powerful earthquakes. So I've given you a model answer at the bottom, but what I'd like you to do at this point is have a look at that question and decode it like this. So where it says using figure 3, describe and give reasons, these are your command words. So the B for bug means box that command word. So do that right now, please. Describe, give reasons. Got a complicated worded question there. But an explain question would have asked a bit more, would have probably been a 7-mark question. So it's very, it was asking for a very light information. The model answer is down the bottom. Just have a read through that now. Sorry, let's do the underline first of all. That's the U in the bug. So we want to box the command word, underline the keywords. So I'm describing, I'm giving reasons, I'm talking about distribution, and I'm going to talk about plate tectonics. These are the things that I'm going to do. So by doing that, spending those 4 seconds doing that in a question will make all the difference. The G in bug stands for glance. This is to glance back at the question, even as you're writing it, to make sure you are describing, you're giving reasons, you have talked about the distribution, you have used plate tectonics. Very helpfully in this question, they've given you the names of the plate tectonics. So what I always say to you guys, it's not about remembering stuff in geography, it's about understanding. The information is there for you. So have a read through the answer. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video right now and just take a short break for 5 minutes. Welcome back. I hope you had your 5-minute break. It's really, really important you take breaks in your revision and your study. Different people will need breaks at different times, and once you've identified what works for you, you should try and stick to that. I'm sure we all needed a break from my dulcet tones anyway. Okay, so let's look at part 3. So part 3 is about interpreting information. This is working with graphs, tables, and pie charts. So it's the 3 sections I've put on your bottom of your worksheet, page 3. So charts like this. You'll be familiar with both of these by now. Especially that one. So as well as, I wouldn't spend too much time in trying to interpret the graphs that you're given. The important thing is to look at the graph, look at the question, and then extract the information from the graph, rather than trying to analyze the whole thing. Well, what is this? What is this? What is it saying to me? You don't need to do that. Get the question, go to the chart for the answer. As I've mentioned, when it comes to climate graphs, there are obviously 2 scales. You can get them mixed up under normal circumstances. Most of you won't mix those up, but in a stressful exam situation where you may have written 6 exams already, you had one in the morning, this is your afternoon one, might be your last one of the entire year, you can make some easy mistakes. So make sure you can identify which is the rainfall, which is the temperature. Rainfall, of course, is always bars, and temperature is always the line, but the y-axis may have swapped over from what you're used to, what you've seen before. But I've always provided a range of both, so you shouldn't have too much of a problem. Okay, let's look at this one here. So, question, study figure 5, which shows a change of fertility rate in China. So, fertility rate. What you've been asked to do is to actually complete it. So, it's pretty easy, and it's a good introduction type of question, good to get you into some more detailed questions. So sometimes you need to extract the data from elsewhere and put them into a table and then complete the lines, but a lot of you would have done this kind of work before. You're looking at data and then completing the information. So it's a simple task, but it's easy to make mistakes if we're not reading data correctly or we're not reading the scale correctly. So this was an easy 1 mark, I think it was, 1 mark question. So here's another question we can decode. Describe the change in shipbuilding that's taken place in Asia and Europe. going to show you this picture now. The second one. This is a suggest question. Suggest why the tonnage, the total weight of ships, but has increased since 1968. So the describe question gets you to just describe what's taking place. Easy 2-mark question. And then they suggest why. So not so much an explain question because you have to be accurate, but suggest is making an educated assumption based on what we know. So just spend a few moments having a look at that. Why would this change in shipbuilding take place? So in the late 1960s, we had Japan, or West Germany, of course, Sweden, the UK, this in the north of England, France. These were the countries that were building ships. And by 2013, it's dramatically changed. We might expect Japan still to be there as a shipbuilding nation, but look at these other big shipbuilding nations that come into play. South Korea, China, Philippines, Vietnam. What do we know about those countries? So this is a larger question about economic development. You could talk about Asian tigers, new emerging economies, increases in population. You could also, depending on which way the other questions go, talk about transportation, containerization, globalization. So there's lots of things, lots of information you can extract from here. But it was a fairly simple question, wasn't it? 3-mark question. Suggests why the shipbuilding has increased. So something like that. Oh, so that's the describe question, isn't it? So I'll get you guys to do this one here. Suggest why the tonnage of ships built has increased since 1968. So I've given you a few clues there. If you can write that underneath that 2-mark question on page 3 of the worksheet. So here's another interesting question that was in paper 2 a few years ago. Table 1.1 gives information about the most powerful earthquake in each year between 2003 and 2012. So again, I wouldn't spend too much time looking and trying to analyse, but we can quickly see, okay, we've got 2003, 2012, we're looking at magnitude on the Richter scale, not used anymore, but never mind, number of deaths and the depth of the focus. So in this really simple 1-mark question, I know there's a lot of data, which is quite an incredibly interesting question. A lot of data here, but it's all it's asking you to do is describe the depth of the Foci, which is the focus of the 10 earthquakes shown in table 2. So basically give an overview of what they are. We can see they're all shallow focus. That's the answer. They're shallow focus. So that's it for now. That's paper 2 in a nutshell. There is some work to be done still on this, but that's given you at least an overview and a worksheet for you to go through. If you go to my YouTube channel, there is lists there. Please use my YouTube channel for that. Don't go around searching for things on paper 2 because there's a lot of information out there that just isn't accurate. I've not created anything there. The content there I've taken from somewhere else. It's just in the paid playlists. So if you look at IGCSE Paper 2 on my YouTube list, there's more information there.